What's going on, my broskies? My name is Toadski, back again here to bring you guys yet another One Piece Treasure Cruise video, and today we're doing a video that I think is really going to help out returning and new players in regards to what they should actually be doing in the game, because I saw this tweet from Chaz, and he says that he's a returning player and he was just wondering what exactly he should be doing with his time and with his stamina in the game. And I kind of mentioned, like, this is kind of like what you want to be doing, but I think that we could go into greater detail to give you guys a bit more information in regards to how you should be effectively spending your stamina. Because look, if you're a new player jumping into the game, Treasure Cruise can be overwhelming. There's lots to look at, there's lots to do. So hopefully this video gives you a bit of a hint in regards to what you should be looking out for. So as for today, we're going to look at Clash characters. And there's a lot of Clash characters in the game. Unfortunately, we don't really get them anymore. Essentially what these were is that they are events that you can go ahead and farm, and by completing the event, you would acquire a free-to-play character. Some of these characters, when they came out, were arguably better than a ton of Sugofest exclusives in the game, but of course with the power creep and the lack of releases of Clashes, Legends now supersede what we have with Clash units. However, with the anniversary that we did get, obviously some of these units received some buffs, which we'll be talking about in this video, and some of the buffs that these characters received were honestly better than the Legends that we get, you know, at the end of every month. So we'll go through it, and we'll go ahead and start from the top with the first character, with Dracul Mihawk. This guy, when he first came out, was probably the best character in the game. He was insane, but unfortunately doesn't really see that much play now, and he is somewhat usable in Rumble, I guess. If you're trying to build a slasher focused team and you don't have those key pieces, you could technically use him, but I think, let's be real, he's not really going to be seeing that much play. Let me just double check real quick, because I believe Mihawk, did he receive a buff recently? I know that some of these Clash characters have received buffs in the past. I'm just looking at it. It looks like Mihawk has received a buff to his kit. He does give Dex-type slasher characters an attack boost. He's actually not terrible. Let's bump him up to B tier. I didn't realize that his abilities were that good. His captain ability is a lot stronger now. He can go to a 5 times captain, give 2 turns of cooldown reduction. Yeah, he seems pretty solid. So I think, all things considered, I think Mihawk's not terrible. We move on to Monster Chopper. He's just bad. And I know that he has received buffs with his special. He is still bad. Garp, also really bad. Zephyr. Now, Zephyr is one of these characters that received buffs during the 11th anniversary, and I think that out of the ones that received buffs during this anniversary, he is the worst of those characters. There aren't really any good teams that he can kind of slide in on. I suppose you could use him on a shooter team, I suppose, but I do think that, you know, with the character tag mechanic, the fact that he doesn't have the Navy tag really hurts him, but I do think that his abilities are pretty solid overall. I would say he's like an A tier character when it's all said and done. And the good thing about like a lot of these raids as well, with how powerful characters are these days, these raids are actually pretty easy to farm up. If you've picked up some of these key characters, obviously the tutorial gives you a Super Sugofest exclusive, there's the 11th anniversary. Farming these characters really isn't that big of an issue. As for Zephyr though, I do think that he's not a terrible character to pick up. Now we have Ivankov here, and I know that Ivankov has received a buff with their special, makes certain slots matching, and gives you not really much else. Yeah, this character's pretty bad. Let me just double check real quick. Yeah, this character's bad. So yeah, you're not going to be farming this one. Doflamingo though, V1 Dofi raid. This guy, he is quite good. He's not that good nowadays. He's definitely better than these characters in D tier. I don't think he's as good as Mihawk. He's just okay. He just gives you a 2 times all boost, which is fine. Especially when it came out, it was amazing. But of course, characters can provide much more than that these days. So I don't think you need to go out of your way to farm this one. Teach is terrible. Heracles is kind of similar to Dofi, where there are some key like pieces of content where you could actually use him. I'd say Dofi is not as valuable anymore, but Heracles just has a very unique special, and I think that you could actually use him in some very specific teams. He's a shooter cerebral focus unit, being able to generate some slots and stuff. Very, very unique kind of kit. Cruzan, yeah, this guy is S tier. This guy is probably the best raid in this entire list if we're just looking in a pure vacuum at what the character does on paper. Cruzan is probably the best of these units. Just an absolutely phenomenal unit. You need to get him, and then you need to feed 9 copies into him to get his level limit break. But because we have guaranteed skill up with dupes now, you just can farm up, I think it's like 15 or 16 copies you'll need to get his special ability completely maxed out, which is 100% required. And then you'll get his level limit break, and then it makes him just literally one of the best free-to-play characters in the game. He is just absolutely phenomenal. we have Enuru coming up next. And again, another character on release was quite good, but unfortunately hasn't really received any buffs, so I can't really recommend him. He's not that great. Duval is terrible. The Buster Call raid, where you actually get more than one character. I think there's like 4 or 5 characters you get from this one raid, but they're all terrible. So again, these characters need buffs. Nightmare Luffy is terrible. Kuma is very similar to Doflamingo in a way. I would say Kuma is probably more valuable because not only does he provide an orb boost, but he also provides pretty good slot change. So if you need a character that does that, Kuma will help you do that. And he's also Cerebral Powerhouse, which is a really neat type and class combo. Boa Hancock, very similar to like Dofi, like definitely better than these lower tier units, but it's just severely power crept, provides a chain locking effect, and I believe she also delays. So pretty interesting effects, but again, not that great. Pika, again, not a terrible unit, but not great either. I wouldn't really like worry about picking him up, but I think that he is the better of these ones that we see in this bottom tier here, so I guess once you've done everything else, you could go ahead and pick him up. He's a very easy clash, but not really that great. Kizaru is not really that great either, but let me just double check because I feel like Borsalino may have been a character that actually received a buff. Let me just go ahead and double check what he does. It doesn't look like he received much of a buff. He just gives you cooldown and a chain boost and an orb boost. Yeah, not an orb boost, sorry. Chain boost, cooldown, and a matching slot. So not a great unit overall. You could probably avoid that one. Sabo is very outdated. When he came out, he was, again, one of those units that was considered to be one of the better clashes in the game. But it was more when you had to take your time when taking on events. And Sabo allowed you to deal more damage than your team was normally capable of doing with tap timing bonus damage. But because we're able to clear content so fast now, and because normal attacks only exists, it basically makes Sabo redundant in almost every way. Shiki, I would say Shiki is better than a lot of the characters in this bottom tier. He actually has a pretty interesting support effect, which gives you an attack boost for your driven units, so do keep that in mind. Gil Tezor, he's pretty terrible. Sakazuki, this guy I would put in the S tier as well. This is one of those new units that received a buff during this celebration. He just has a phenomenal special ability, especially when you can partner it up with the 11th anniversary Kizaru. The combo you get, being able to get that 3 times color affinity for multiple turns, matching slots, remove enemy defensive effects, ignited conditional boost. He does just a ton of stuff. For a free-to-play unit that's pretty easy to farm, yeah, it's hard to really stray away from this one. This guy's an absolute beast. Magellan, very similar to the Sabo, where when he first came out was amazing for dealing damage, but again, not really a problem anymore. General Frankie is garbage. Bellamy is another one of these units that's like just an orb booster. He generates matching slots as well, which is pretty cool. I believe he also has double special launch, which means you're able to use him obviously on multiple different stages to get that matching slot and orb boosting effect. So Bellamy definitely better than some of these lower tier ones. Fujitora I think is also another S tier unit, set target status and also removing defensive effects. Perfect synergy with Borsalino, being able to have Fujitora charge his own special, and then the 11th anniversary Kizaru charge his special again, so you can technically get double special launch. So I do think that Fujitora is definitely one of these key ones to pick up. I think this is definitely the order though. I think Kuzan's the best, I think Sakazuki is the second best, and then Fujitora I think is the worst of the 3, just because he relies more on Kizaru to lower his cooldown, so you can technically get a double special launch. But I mean, even without that, I think this guy's a pretty solid unit, definitely to look out for, especially because he has Super Tandem, and that Super Tandem synergizing well with the Kizaru and stuff. Yeah, it's this character is definitely worth picking up. We got Virgo here, not very good. Sanji, not very good. Caesar, not very good. Now Bato is an interesting one too. I think Bato could be a little higher on this list, maybe the top of C. Again, he's more of a defensive focused unit, but he has a pretty interesting special. He removes resilience, which I guess is kind of neat. But you know, if you are taking on content where it has like a pretty severe death hit, Bato allows you to tank that, which is kind of neat. Rayleigh is definitely better than the DT units, but still not a great unit, basically just providing an attack boost. Nothing really too crazy there. Senor Pink is garbage. Lucci is not very good. Zora is pretty interesting. The good thing about Zora is that not only does he provide like a buff to your team with color affinity, but he also removes enemy defensive effects, and Zora gets access to pretty good support effects. Although obviously in this celebration we also have like 6+ Dex Zora, we have 6+ Anniversary Zora, we have Luffy, Zora, and Sanji. So if you're coming into this celebration, there's a lot of new Zoras running around, which means running this Zora on a team is actually kind of difficult to do so. One thing that's positive about this guy is that he's not only a slasher focus unit, but he also boosts driven. So if you want to build a driven team, this is not a bad unit to have on your account. Moving on, we have Cracker. Now this guy is actually quite good. I would say he's almost almost probably an A tier unit. The good thing about Cracker is that he has a little bit of utility. He removes like chain debuffs, but he also gives you a full board of deck slots, and then he makes them beneficial. And that could be very useful to have on your team, just being able to generate slots, and it goes through block slots as well. And he is a cerebral powerhouse unit, which is a very interesting class combo. So I think Cracker is definitely one of the ones you probably want to have because of the really cool orb change that he has. Teach is terrible. You don't need to worry about him. Dofi. Now, this is the V2 raid Doflamingo. This one definitely is more useful these days compared to what this Dofi is doing. The cool thing about him is that you need to have a cerebral or a driven captain, but when you launch the special, he locks your orbs, which is neat. But then also, any attack or orb boost on your crew gets a further 2 turns tacked on top of it. So being able to make a 1-turn buff last for 3 turns, so you can carry it over multiple stages, really cool effect. So I do think that Dofi is a really neat one, but sometimes can be tricky to run on a team because he doesn't really provide utility. He's just like a modifying buff kind of character. So in high-end content, you never use him, but could be interesting depending on the team composition. Judge is another character that I think is not an awful one to pick up. Color Affinity, removes chain debuffs. Pretty good unit overall, especially like not a lot of these raids focus on Color Affinity. Like a lot of them attack orb boost and stuff like that. So this guy's a pretty solid unit to have. Arlong is pretty trash. Ace, I wish he was better, but I would say he's better than the DT units, but he's definitely nowhere near as good as some of these characters near the top. The Docking Straw Hats are garbage. Now, Big Mom. This character really doesn't do much. When you read her on paper, it seems garbage. However, the cool thing about Big Mom is that you can use her to kind of like just destroy mini bosses and content. You can use her as long as you have a really high HP pool. She cuts your health in half, and then how much health that you lost is added onto a multiplier, and then deltas damage to the opponent. So there's really cool circumstances where you could just use a Big Mom special to just wave clear a mini boss. Really cool stuff with her. So very unique. Like there's not many characters that do what she does, and I've definitely used her a lot more than some of the other clashes that you see here, at least in terms of modern content. So when we get those periods of time where, you know, your special is maxed at the start of content, Big Mom is going to be really good for that type of content. Unfortunately, Bedge is really bad. Magellan and Hannibal is not very good either. Garp and Sengoku, an interesting unit, does remove your beneficial effects, which you can use, but then they also apply an attack and an orb boost for fighter, so they're not that great. I don't really recommend picking them up. The Stampede units, not very good either. Rob Lucci's okay, he's got a bit of utility, but nothing really too crazy. Sabo is very similar to that. He provides color affinity, a bit of utility, but again, nothing too crazy. Crocodile's pretty cool. He was the first unit in the game, to my knowledge, that introduced Chain Boundary. So again, just having another chain buff to stack with additions, multiplicative, tap timing chains is pretty cool. And I believe he has orb changing mechanics too, which is pretty cool. Carrot is, again, another unit that's okay. She removes increased defense, can provide you with an attack boost, but these characters are just way worse compared to like even generic rare recruits that you can pull on Sukofest these days, so you're not really going to use them all that much. Kirby and Helmeppo is a unit that I actually have used a decent amount. I think that they would probably be near the top of this list. Their switch effect is kind of whatever, but the fact that you can have this unit be either a side unit or an int unit, they allow you to remove enemy defensive effects, they give you an attack boost for sign-in characters, and I believe with Kirby and Helmeppo, depending on which one you are, they have like different classes as well, which could be used in interesting scenarios. So this is a unit that I've definitely used more than some of these other units on this list, so that's why I'd put him in this tier right here. We have Shanks and Mihawk. This character is trash. Bonnie's a very good unit. She is a very good unit for removing enemy defensive effects, and sometimes on random treasure maps, a lot of these clash units will just somehow be boosted. Bonnie's a character that has been boosted in quite a lot of treasure maps in the past, and having access to a unit such as this is very, very good. Let me just pull up her abilities real quick, because what she does is quite good. So she removes threshold and increased defense by 5 turns, and also changes your slots into recovery. And I believe she makes them beneficial with her crewmate ability. Let me just double check. She also sets all slots to recovery at the start of the quest, and then also makes them beneficial. Yeah, it's hard to really argue that. This unit's quite good, being able to generate slots and also deal with enemy defensive effects. Yeah, this is probably one of the best units in this tier. Honestly, might even go to A tier in terms of how useful it is, because as soon as you're starting your account, you want characters that have these utility breaking effects so you can actually clear content. Usually damage is not a problem. If you're going back to older content, these enemies don't have much HP, but you still need characters to get through the gimmicks, whether it be defensive effects, attack down, bind despair, etc. So Bonnie being able to give you slots and get through that is really, really cool. The Cypher Bowl characters are bad. Do not worry about them. However, they do have an interesting gimmick with Captain Switch, which could be useful. I guess I'll put them in C tier just because of that alone. Every other effect on this unit is redundant. Jinbei is a color affinity booster, does provide a bit of utility, nothing too crazy though. Kaido is an interesting unit. I don't even remember ever using this character, like literally ever. This character gives you an attack boost based on combo hits, and then also will be able to do a bit of damage. Yeah, this character is pretty bad. Don't even worry about that one. Crocodile, a little bit of orb change, chain boost. Nothing crazy. Sober Mask, a unit that I really haven't ever used, to be honest. Brook, I've used him maybe once or twice. Nothing too crazy there. Shinobu and Nami, this character I have used a little bit too. This character providing color affinity, some orb changing mechanics is pretty cool. And plus Nami gets access to pretty interesting supports as well, so that's always nice. And then we have Luffy Tower. So obviously the big issue with a Luffy unit is that there's a ton of Luffys in the game. So there are not going to be too many circumstances where you can actually fit Luffy onto a team. But, of course, Luffy gets access to good effects. He does remove Special Bind. He also gives you an attack boost and can potentially give you buffs for multiple turns. So, like, Luffy on paper is quite good, but fitting him on a team is another thing. That's going to be the hard part with him. Marco, wouldn't really advise picking him up, but he does have the ability to remove Burn, if I remember correctly. Let me go ahead and pull him up real quick. I think he gives you an attack boost, right? He removes Burn by 5 turns, or boost, and then he could potentially give you a heal. Not that great, right? Like, there's not too many circumstances where that's going to be that useful. Usopp and Chopper, absolutely not. The local sea monster, pretty cool character. This was a global first unit, actually, when it first came out. Local sea monster is not a tricky event at all, and I believe it gave you an attack boost. It would boost quick and Psy slot effects by 1.75. Also removes increased defense and damage threshold. And then you can potentially get another orb boost in the turn after that. So yeah, I would probably put them in the C tier. Bit of utility, bit of orb boost, like what most of these Clash characters are doing, obviously. Moving on to the Buggy's Delivery, this character is not that great. And then the Jinbei, this Dex Jinbei is actually quite good. He has double special launch, he's got the ability to cut your health so you can kind of get around stun, he gets around paralysis, he does just a lot of really cool stuff, so I would say Jinbei is definitely one of the better Clashes to look out for. So yeah, that's pretty much like all of these raid characters in the game. So there's a ton of them that you can pretty much ignore for the most part. Anything that is B tier and up, I would try and get on your account as soon as you can, because there could be circumstances where they're going to be very good. However, characters like Luffy, who it's hard to put Luffy on a team. Crocodile, there's just better units that do what he does. And like Doflamingo, I don't think is going to be very useful in a ton of content. He's very niche. But then you got like Judge, Zoro, and Mihawk all have pretty interesting effects that you can abuse. And then the A tier to S tier, these are characters that have really cool abilities that you could actually see quite a lot of play with, honestly. Pretty cool characters overall, especially the S tier with Kuzan, Sakazuki, Fujitora, and to an extent Zephyr as well. Those four with those most recent buffs make them honestly legend tier. They're really, really strong. Hopefully we get more buffs like that in the future. You know, if we get like a new update to, I don't know, let's say we get like a new Doflamingo batch. Like, it'd be cool to get like buffing these old Dofa units, buff the Bellamy, buff the Pika raid, stuff like that. I would love to see more stuff. Like Senor Pink, more buffs to him as well. Anyways, hopefully we see more stuff like that in the future. So I plan on making videos for like this for like the Colosseums as well, because there's a ton of different Colosseum characters. So we're going to go through that as well, but hopefully this gives you a bit more information in regards to what you should be using your stamina on in terms of Clash events in One Piece Treasure Cruise. Obviously we have the treasure map coming up shortly and the Kizuna Clash this month, so that's going to be something to keep an eye out for. But you know, obviously you got a lot of stamina to use. You want to try and farm up and establish your account in Treasure Cruise, and this is going to be the best way to do it. So that's going to wrap it up from me. Thank you so much for watching the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure to go ahead and leave a like. And if you want to stay up to date with all the content I post, including more One Piece Treasure Cruise content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. On that, guys, I'll see you guys within the next video.